twitchy as a motherfucker. I had way too much caffeine in my workout. So, welcome to everyone who's here. Um, I have an interesting conversation today to bring you guys. I have the founder of basically a search alternative for video. And that search alternative for video is designed to aggregate results from a multitude of different sites. And why that's important? Well, because content like mine is heavily suppressed by platforms like YouTube. And what this kind of thing does is it allows content like mine to still be found even if YouTube decides that they don't want it to be. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I'm looking forward to trying to interact with as many alternative tech people as possible. And to be honest, if you're not interested in alternative tech with this COPPA thing, which we'll get into because we both have some knowledge on that, if you're not interested in alternative tech because of the COPPA thing, you haven't been paying attention, or you just don't like freedom, I think. So with all that aside, I've got a couple ad reads to do. Before I get into anything, one of my normal sponsors, Liberty Under Attack Publications, you can watch an interview I did with the founder, or sorry, founder, the author of a book called Brushfire, Libertarian Fiction. You can find that interview on the channel. It's, I think, the video right before this one. But that interview is for a publication house that sponsors this content, and you can get that and a bunch of other things relatively cheaply right now because they're on sale for Black Friday. The publishing house is Liberty Under Attack Publications. Looking for a Liberty-focused publisher? Liberty Under Attack Publications assists authors through the entire publishing process. Proofreading, editing, cover designs, paperback and Kindle formatting, and full audiobook narration and post-production. Tell them Jeremiah sent you and take 20% off a full-service deal. They also publish books and strategy guides for individuals looking to increase their personal freedom. Great anarchist fiction like Agora, and guides like Shane Radliff's Vanu, a strategy for self-liberation. To publish your next book or to find your next read, please visit libertyunderattack.com. Share your story. Find your freedom. Additionally, on that particular score, I'll be interviewing Shane Radliff about his books through that publishing site on Friday. So feel free to subscribe, like, etc., in order to get all the updates involving that. The other sponsor, great guy, Liberty Professionals, will help you secure your home, small business, and life. It is run by a residential security expert who's an ASIS board certified physical security professional. And if you need work done in the Virginia area, they also do missing persons investigations, skip tracing, and more. Contact them for more info. He has all the necessary tools in his toolbox to bring you peace of mind and stability for the future. Support Liberty businesses and these streams by heading over to libertyprofessionals.com to get your consult today. With all that in mind, I'm joined by Craig Stadler, who is the founder of a video search aggregator purported to be better than DuckDuckGo for video and generally good for the people who want to get access to all videos, not just the ones that corporations want you to see. So, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you want to do this in the first place?
Awesome. Thanks for having me. About myself personally, I started coding when I was about 10 years old. I just had my 50th birthday, so I've been a coder and a developer and all kinds of different things for about 40 years now or so, and spent about 15 years out in Silicon Valley, and now I'm located in Erie, Pennsylvania. And essentially my specialty has been for the past decade or so solar search engines, which is essentially the infrastructure that runs search on e-commerce and other types of search platforms. And I've developed several search engines over the past 5 or so years, and about a year ago or so now, it's coming up on a year, I think in December anyway, I had noticed that basically video search had kind of collapsed essentially. And everywhere I would go, whether it was Bing or Yahoo or pretty much anywhere, when I would do video search, it was all toward YouTube, essentially. And I have nothing against YouTube in particular, but I started doing research and found that all these other players were still out there, like Dailymotion and Vimeo and VO and Metacafe and just all these places that I'd known about for the past, 4 or 5 years, kind of thing, maybe longer than that, were still out there and they were still alive, but their content was kind of nowhere to be found unless you went directly to their portal and searched for it, which was really disappointing for me, thinking that Google video search was essentially going to give me this, really broad spectrum of all these content providers. I just wasn't getting that. And so I started doing kind of informal interviews with friends and people that I met saying, hey, do you ever use Google video search? And 100% of them all said, kind of unprovoked, no, I don't bother using that because it just gives me YouTube and I just go straight to YouTube instead, which I think is partially by design, could be by design. Who knows? But anyway, so, in the wake of that evidence, so to speak, I was like thinking to myself, I think that there could be room out there for a search provider that actually caters to everything except for YouTube. That was my initial thought. And I know it's counterintuitive to a certain extent, but I felt like people deserved the option to be able to get things outside of YouTube, and there just didn't seem to be any.
At all.
Yeah, didn't seem to be any way to do that. And so I was thinking, you know what? I think I'm going to do this. And as I started doing research, I found more and more platforms. I found Minds. I found BitChute. I found Brighteon, which I think at that point was called Real Video, I think. Anyways, a lot of alternative platforms for video that have kind of spawned in the last 5 years or less to give people a more flexible range of content to be able to put up without the limitations that YouTube has, that kind of thing. And so it was surprising to me, the more research that I did, the more platforms I found, and then I found competitors to YouTube in other countries, in Indonesia, in Iran, in Japan, and China. And the more sources I found, the more validity it gave to the idea that I essentially set out to do, which was give people a really diverse experience that they wouldn't normally get anywhere else, let alone Google's property. So that's kind of what started me on the journey. So, yeah.
All right. So why don't we talk a little bit more about these alternative video platforms? And one of the reasons YouTube claims to have basically sold their their user base under the river, because I know you're gonna try to be objective, but I hate YouTube and Google in general. I think that they're information controllers and they're basically tantamount to government agents. But that's my particular bias. I know the reason they say they stopped authorizing as much content and as much searchability is because they have to maintain viability. They have to, in order to avoid violating laws. They have to, etc., etc. How comfortable are you running a site to search aggregate videos that might be considered wrongthink, for instance? I mean, you're talking Brighteon, which is heavily used by people like from the very far right perspective.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Things like Real Video, Minds, etc. All these platforms are used by people who are either far right or right adjacent. And basically the far right's a buzzword right now, and sort of rightfully so because of the current state of politics. How comfortable are you with that level of wrongthink?
Well, I mean, the other thing that I didn't mention about PeteyVid in particular was, I was very aware of DuckDuckGo and their whole stand on privacy. And obviously, things have been heating up for quite a while in regards to free speech, with Jordan Peterson and, with all the stuff that happened with Gab and just a lot of different aspects of the internet in general in regards to free speech. And so part of my idea in providing a diverse search experience with PeteyVid was I wanted to wrap those things up with the experience too as well, being that I didn't want to, track user IP addresses. I'm not saving, history for user searches, that kind of thing. That, is part of the privacy policy. Obviously, not use, trackers that link back to Google Analytics, just a lot of things like that in the privacy aspect. And then in the other aspect of it, diversity to me encompasses, a certain maybe uncomfortable part of free speech that
Mm-hmm.
people might not like, that kind of thing. But that to me is, embodies that search experience kind of thing, because, I was around when going to college, essentially, when the internet started, not the internet itself, but the web, I guess you would say,
Web
the World Wide
2.0.
Web. Well, no, I mean, I basically in 1991, I was at Georgia State University teaching
Oh, so
Telnet.
www.
Yes, yeah, the web itself, yeah. So, from that point until very recently, it's been kind of like the Wild West, and people put up what they put up, and they're accountable for it. And if people don't like it, they go somewhere else or they criticize it. And that's part of free speech to me, kind of thing. And so that's why I decided, to build this into PeteyVid, and give people that option. So I guess you're asking what's my comfort level with some of those things being in PeteyVid. I'm completely comfortable with it because I believe that the platform itself should be responsible for whatever they do or don't want on their platform, be that, a PeerTube instance or DTube or Brighteon or those kinds of things. There's certain levels of acceptability of that stuff, even though people say that there's free speech that they don't like, that borderlines on like hate speech or racism or things like that. You're never going to find anything that's blatantly illegal. And that's pretty much where I draw the line with the whole free speech thing, because when you get into things like child pornography and stuff like that, that's completely unacceptable, obviously. But that's not a matter of free speech kind of thing. So does that answer your question?
It does, it does.
Okay.
I ask a lot of very sort of out there questions because I like to get like somebody's sort of off kilter take, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I like to know what they think about something from a perspective that most people might not ask it from. So you did give a good answer to that. Although I would say, when you talk about like free speech, um, do you personally curate the sites that you aggregate, or is it open to like votes? Is there some place that people can decide what sites get aggregated versus others?
No, that's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that. I'm pretty much the sole curator. And so, how do I make that decision? It's not based on whether I like or don't like the content. It has to do with two main things. Is the content relatively fresh? Does it get updated? Is there new content coming in all the time from that source? And is there a decent amount of it? Somebody from an upcoming video portal website contacted me about a week ago, and they said, I'm really interested in having my videos on your search engine. And I said, well, how far along are you? And they said, well, we only have about 50 videos, and they're kind of just dribbling in. I said, well, why don't you contact me when you've got like a better flow of, user contributed videos coming in, because I don't want to say it's not worth my time to code that, crawler, ingestion, so to speak. But yeah, if there's not much content and it's not very relatively new, I'm probably not going to include it. So yeah, so
Okay,
the
because
decision, yeah, that's how
Brighteon,
I make the decision basically. So
yeah, well, because
yeah,
Brighteon doesn't have much content very regularly. It like it has certain content from certain creators semi regularly, but
right.
it doesn't have like. And I've noticed that a lot of the videos on that site get like maybe 30 views on the outside. And I'm not one to talk about that. Like my channel doesn't get very many views itself, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of my particular type of channel on YouTube, and there's a lot of content coming out. So
Mm.
in terms of Brighteon itself and sites like it, um, what is the threshold for volume for a site to be considered?
That's a really good question. You know, I think part of the appeal with Brighteon, this is a different dimension of what I talked about initially. I was just talking about, the volume of content and the freshness of it, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the third dimension, I guess, would be, or an additional one would be, when they became, or were real video, I guess, and then they became Brighteon. The fact that they were representing something that had intentionally been kicked off of YouTube, I thought was important to be put into PeteyVid for that very reason. And I know that's kind of arbitrary, but I remember, I think the reason that real video came to mind for me was because Alex Jones had been kicked off of multiple platforms and had
Oh
gone
yeah,
to
heavily
real.
censored.
Yeah. And so it wasn't just because I wanted Alex Jones material to be found in PeteyVid, but it was more so I wanted that type of material to be found in PeteyVid for that very point of like anti-censorship kind of thing. So that was another consideration to have them included.
All right, yeah, and
Yeah.
because Real Video puts out a shit ton of content because it's Alex Jones's new home, um, and like I think he actually owns Real Video if I understand it correctly. Um, go ahead. You look like you want to
No,
say
I was going
something.
to say, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, and I kind of suspected that too as well, but didn't really have any. I think maybe what it was is there was some sponsorships there that were directly related to Infowars or something that made me assume that, but I don't know.
Well, and
Both possible.
like, because I've only seen Infowars stuff there, and when I tried, because I thought, Real Video, it has Alex Jones on it. It almost certainly have me. So I looked for a place where I could sign up to upload content, and there was no sign up location, and it said basically that it was a site for people who got censored. Um, so maybe it's not owned by Alex Jones. I think I'd have to look into that.
Yeah.
But if it's not, it's certainly basically Alex Jones's at this point. Fucking possession 9/10 of the blah blah. But
Yeah.
the like so okay. Have you ever considered having like a Reddit style thing, like maybe like Gab is doing, where people can submit a content aggregation site or a video site for your consideration? Or do they just contact you on social media?
Most of the time it's on social media. I get a lot of dialogue through Minds, through the
Okay.
PDVid channel there, and then direct email as
Gotcha. All
well.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and I was gonna ask you about that. First off, what's the direct email address people can reach you at? Like, we're not near the end of the interview. I just need this to be out there.
Sure. It's just info@pdvid.com.
Okay.
INFO.
All right. Because the next question is, Alex Jones isn't just banned. You simply can't bring him up in a positive context without being accused of hate speech. So, and this is on Facebook, and I assume Twitter has a similar policy. At least they'll flag you.
Okay.
They haven't come out and said it, but Facebook and Instagram will outright ban you for saying something positive about Alex Jones because he's in their quote hate figure database, which is
Hmm.
not only asinine and stupid, but real strong evidence that Facebook really loves that CIA money. Either way, I wanted to ask two questions. First off, is Facebook included in your aggregation? And second off, um, in terms of Alex Jones and people like him who are on the hate figure database, have you first ever heard of this hate figure database? And second, are you comfortable with the possibility of losing your social media access for saying the wrong thing about the wrong person?
Okay. So, firstly, yes, there is Facebook. There are Facebook videos within PDVid, but I wouldn't say there's, in order of like magnitude of how much content is in there, they're very far down the list.
Right.
Very far down. I could go through the list with you of all of them, but there's about 55 of them or so, I think, at this point. Um, and then, as far as hearing about that type of list for individuals like that, like Milo or like Alex Jones or people of that nature, I've not heard of it, but I'm not at all surprised that that exists, kind of thing, because as the owners of those social media properties and that kind of thing, I'm not sure where who's making the decisions about those types of things, but I believe that that's their right to do that. I can't really speak to the fact of whether I agree with it or not, because I try to, like I said earlier, try to remain objective, because really the mission of the website, I try to stay with that even personally and try to be like, this is what I'm trying to provide,
Right.
but I don't really want to get into conversations about like, one side or the other kind of thing,
Yeah.
because I believe it's important to have both of those come to light, even to extremes that could be uncomfortable for people.
So if they suppress your account, it's all for the purpose of neutrality, and you don't mind taking one for the team?
Well, I mean, if it ended up happening, which I don't want to say I'm anticipating it happening, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does. I don't think it's going to be because of something that I've said. I think it's going to be because they're against what it is that I'm doing with the website, kind of thing,
Right.
which I've never really heard that happening, so to speak. I've more so heard, people voicing their opinions about something representing an organization, and the account getting shut down because the employee of that organization has expressed a view that, say, Twitter doesn't like.
Right. Right. So
Which,
so
yeah,
you suspect as long as you remain relatively neutral, it won't happen. But if it does happen, it happens.
I agree. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Most
Okay.
of the stuff that's posted on our channels are either news updates, reviews that have been made about PeteyVid, statistics, and a lot of news in relationship to privacy, censorship, bias, all that kind of stuff. Because really, if people are there and subscribe to our channel, the PeteyVid channel on whatever social media outlet, they know what it is that we do and they're into it. So why not give them more news and more information about that kind of, topic, subject, that kind of thing, even though it's not about us. It's kind of more so just facilitating the idea of, like I said, anti-censorship, non-bias, that kind of thing. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. So with that in mind, first off, where did the name PDVig come from, and where did the logo come from?
Okay. Good question. So, essentially, I came up with the idea for, this, like I said, search engine that caters mainly to non-YouTube content, blah, 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 everything I'd already pretty much described. And, I started to come up with a proof of concept to make this search engine thing just exist. And so I made it, wasn't really sure what I was going to call it. And then I spent probably a good 2 or 3 days trying to figure out like what name I was going to use because, typically when you come up with something and you're going to put it on the internet, you want to make sure that something else isn't called the same thing and that it can't get confused with something else. And, that typical journey that most people should be taking when they come up with a product that's going to be on the internet. And obviously, because the internet is so huge at this point in time, and a lot of squatters have bought up domain names that they thought somebody might want to overcharge them later on, which is a typical thing. It's been going on for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It was really hard for me to come up with any type of name that either didn't make sense, that was just gibberish, which sometimes people end up calling their site that. I gave up essentially, and I was like, you know what? I'll figure this out later. I'm going to go back to like coding, the search engine, and so. Was working and I looked down and my cat was sitting there and his name's Petey. He's a ginger.
Mm.
And essentially my wife named him after that TV show Pete and Pete
Oh, I have no idea.
I think it was on Nickelodeon a long time ago, a while ago, 90s or something like that. But anyways, point being is, I was like, hey, Pete's a really cool cat. People like cats on the internet. He's not like subversive or threatening or that kind of thing. Cats are cool and cute and inquisitive. And so I started looking up PD related stuff, and I was like, hey, you know what? If I use these two words together instead of PD video, just shorten it, kind of thing. And if sure enough, of course, there was nothing on the internet called PDVid, kind of thing. So it was like perfect. And so I took a local guy here who's done a lot of special effects and artwork for like horror related things and death metal and stuff like that, and gave him essentially this picture of my cat who was climbing up a cat post or whatever on his condo. And I said, I want this to look cartoonized, but I don't want it to look like it's for a cereal box or for a pet food or something like that. Somewhere in between, not quite like Felix the cat, but not quite,
So like
like the real
sports
thing.
mascot.
Maybe, yeah, yeah, something closer to that kind of thing, yeah. And
Gotcha.
so that's where that came from essentially, and it was something that just kind of popped up and it worked and it made sense and good timing. So there you go.
All right. So my question is, uh, are most of the videos, because you probably have a direct feed of all content that goes through that site, are most of your videos more inoffensive kind of cat video kind of things, or did you notice that the volume of quote hateful content increased when you stopped filtering it like YouTube?
Well, I mean, the way that the crawlers work is basically, I decide the source that gets kind of like mined on a daily or hourly or whatever basis kind of thing. And then the bots are essentially designed from a central library to accommodate for different kinds of content. So, and when I say different kinds of content, what I mean is like regional. different languages, that kind of thing. Not necessarily in regards to, the angle that you're talking about. What I would say is the amount of I don't want to say like hate speech or that kind of thing to classify that, but anything in that kind of category, it's probably a very, very small amount of the videos that are actually in PeteyVid. I think as of a few days ago, we just passed 418 million videos across about, I want to say 55 platforms in pretty much every language. So if you consider 418 million videos, to get a high percentage of that would be considered offensive that'd be a lot.
It'd be
So
astonishing.
yeah, it would be. Yeah. So, uh, I've never actually ran any kind of analyzer against those 418 million videos to be able to say X number of them include this word or that word. I'm not really interested in that, because what I'm interested in is having a huge resource available for people to find whatever it is that they want. And then
Okay.
if that happens to be baking a cake or whatever, then that's fine. I just want, like I said, the biggest point for me is to provide the ability for people to search and get things back without that decision being made for them ahead of time.
Which is extremely
Yeah.
reasonable. So, I guess another question that could be asked would be, is there going to be any API, or is there any API now for your site?
I'm still going over that, and I need to meet with legal counsel to find out how that works, kind of thing. Because I don't know for all 55 of these, different platforms, essentially, showing their results in typical search engine has its own connotations, right? Being a search engine has its own connotations. Redistributing information, that's another, a completely different thing. We were talking the other day about possibly creating a smart TV app so that you could actually just pull it up on your TV and search for videos and watch videos from all these different places on a television. Just throwing the idea out there, kind of thing.
Right.
Ran into the same thing, being like, if we were to make a smart TV app for this, well, we would need to actually have the source of that video, the MP4 URL or whatever, and feed that into the app, which is not necessarily being a search engine anymore. That's different connotation. And as you know, a lot of the bigger companies out there have their specific terms and their specific rules about how their content can be redistributed, which is a whole nother legal animal, so to speak.
Right.
So
They,
we're
they and
right
they
now we're
and they
just
eat
sticking
people
to.
like sharks.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So we want to stay under, the premise of being a search engine, which already has established, acceptable rules and things like that. Before we step outside of that, maybe get a bigger user base, obviously, to dictate the whole API thing. But we've been asked a few times about that already. So we're interested in doing it. We just don't necessarily want to spend the money on legal research yet to do that. So,
Okay. So
but I do. Yeah.
so on that score then, do you, and this was a real strong question that I had in my mind when I initially saw your site. Do you have plans on sticking to this particular format for pretty much ever, or is there like an inkling of thought in your mind of becoming something like what Google Video was when it started out as a search aggregator and became eventually a host of content and then eventually ate YouTube?
You know what? I think the only thing in my mind that could happen outside of what we're doing now, I mean, a direct answer would be no. I don't want to do that.
Right.
No. There's certain responsibilities and implications and just messiness that comes with that, and everybody's seen it happen. Not really interested in going that way at all. The only thing that I am interested in doing, which is probably more of a reality at this point, is developing a mobile app that essentially you can give the app itself things that you're interested in, topics, keywords, things like that, and it can ping our database and feed you back only the videos that you want as they're actually located by our system, which is kind of like a Google Alerts kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
but specifically for video. So you don't have to go back to the search engine over and over again as you remember things. You basically just make a list of things that you're interested in, and it feeds them back to you like on a daily or hourly basis,
Well, so
which
okay,
makes a lot more sense. So.
daily or hourly basis is an interesting bridge to another question. How many fucking queries are you putting out? Because like, I gotta think that you're putting out like a ton of queries if you're like doing this as a regular thing. And do have any of these platforms like tried to block your calls or something?
No, I mean we have this distributed through. I mean it's the same kind of thing that Google or anybody else does. They don't have like a single machine with like 1,000 threads just hammering the hell out of you know these places or whatever. I want to say we're bringing in close to about 2 million videos a day, which is still quite a bit. But when that's distributed over a lot of different platforms, it's a lot more even at that point. So if you have 55 different platforms and you spread that out over, those 100 or a million or 2 million videos per day, it allows us to grow nicely without hammering the hell out of, the resource that we're getting them from. So
Right, because you don't want to be accused of like DDoS or something.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, because you're trying to be like neutral and semi friendly to people, and you're not trying to be like an accidental anonymous. That makes sense. Um, so okay, on that score then, this database that you have, that would possibly be an easy thing to make an API out of. Is there any like way that you're gonna include like potentially a code where people can like embed a search box on their site or something like that?
Well, yes. The short answer is we do want to do it. We've had a couple of users actually already create their own kind of widget, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
to put on their sites. That doesn't really require an API. All that is basically it's like kind of an HTML form
Right.
that,
Right.
yeah, they put on their blog or, you know, Wix site or whatever kind of thing.
As long as they
That
use like
allows,
iframe or something.
exactly, yeah. And then the user puts the thing in, they hit the button, and it takes them over to our site and feeds the search term into the query, and they get all the results on PeteyVid kind of thing. I'm interested in making that widget, and I think that would be fine. It doesn't really require an API. Um, but I guess part of my thinking is, you know, I'm the sole developer, so
Right.
it's a matter of like, how much time do I put into it? And then, the biggest problem of this entire project has been exposure, which I guess is, anybody's problem at this point with 8 billion people on the planet and me being one kind of thing. Like, how do you get people to actually notice what you're doing kind of thing? And ideally, you've, created something that has some type of appeal, but even still, it's tough. It takes a lot of time and a lot of trying different ideas essentially
Right.
to try to get people to notice. And not to get off topic, but one of the things I realized in the beginning when I started the project was like, I got to be completely fucking stupid to even be trying to do this, to go up against Google effectively kind of thing. Or this is really good timing and there's an audience for this. And even if I only get 1% of the search market, that'd be huge kind of thing. And then, on top of that, I saw the success that DuckDuckGo's been having, and, they're serving out something in regards of like 50 million searches, like, I can't remember what it was, a week or a day or a month or something like that, but it was something incredibly huge. So, there's obviously an audience for there, and and that's what made me continue it and to do it essentially. So.
All right, yeah, and that's a good bridge into another thing. We were talking about this before we went live. You said that one of the motivations for starting this was that you saw DuckDuckGo as a great search engine for everything except video. Do you mind elaborating on that?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So when I started to do my initial research, as I said, I talked to a lot of people who said they don't bother using Google Video because it just gives them YouTube results. And so I started to do more research, and I was like, well, how does Yahoo do this? How does Bing do this? That kind of thing. And pretty much no matter where I went, it was all the same thing. It was all just YouTube all at the top. And so then I was like, well, maybe DuckDuckGo is different. So I went to them, and sure enough, it was the same thing. So I was like, oh, come on, you guys. Like, this is like really weird. And so I started to think, you know what, maybe this isn't any type of, algorithm that's intentionally doing this from all these different places. Maybe it's just a simple concept of like, if you have a huge bag and you have 5 million pennies in it and you have like 100 dimes, if you reach into that bag, what are you going to get? Right?
Yeah.
So
So
that was pretty much my thinking at that point. It's just amount of sheer volume that basically, if you're indexing content and there's so much YouTube stuff, what do you think people are going to see? They're going to see that. And so my next train of thought was like, okay, I'm just not going to include YouTube at all.
right.
And then I was thinking, well, maybe I'll include some YouTube. And so I started thinking, because I started to think to myself, if there's none at all, I think that could turn people away. But if
Right.
there's some and it's strategic about how I'm putting it in, which I can't completely reveal about how I'm doing that, but I decided like what kind of YouTube content is valuable as opposed to like a 30-second commercial or a minute and a half food review. Those things are all great, and people can go to YouTube and get them, and that's all fine. But my idea was to kind of like level the playing field and give people diversity, essentially.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
so speaking of some of the people that could show up on your site, there are some people that don't want that much diversity. How much how much control does the end user have over the diversity that they have? Can they, for instance, filter search results to exclude YouTube?
Not yet. So as of last week, I've been working on a bang system for PeteyVid, which a bang system is essentially a shortcut,
Right.
right? And so uh, what that means is, and I've had a lot of requests from people like on BitChute, for example, that have said, hey, how do I use this just to search DTube or PeerTube or BitChute or that kind of thing? And so I think it's time now for me to make some additional custom filtering options, so to speak, that somebody can go into PeteyVid and say, bang Brighteon and search for Trump or something or whatever. So they can actually say, I want to include these sites only, kind of thing. That's
Right.
not to say that's not to say that that's going to serve like discluding resources, because it really doesn't. That could be revisited later on. But I think it's more so people knowing what they do want as opposed to what they don't want. So if they're doing, a video search and they know Nico Video in Japan, that's a resource that they want. They can go say bang Nico Video and bang QQ, which QQ is, I believe it's in the same region, but
Yeah.
that kind of thing where they can say, or they can say, bang BitChute, bang DTube, bang PeerTube, and then they can just search just those platforms, which I could see people doing because they're often the same user base.
Or like Vkontakte?
What's that?
Or like Vkontakte? VK?
Oh, VK, yes. Sorry. I never hear anyone actually pronounce VK. So when I heard it, I was like, wait a minute.
I
Yeah,
believe
right.
that's how
Like,
it's pronounced. I might be
yeah,
I might be adding an extra at the end, but I'm pretty sure. But I like okay,
you're right.
so
Yeah.
what sites off the top of your head are included that aren't normally emphasized in what could be termed Google-centric search networks?
Well, I mean, here's the thing is what I've noticed, obviously, when you go to Google Video and you do a search, if you search for something that's related to politics, often you get a lot of like news outlets, whether it's the New York Post or CNN or
Corporate
that kind
bullshit.
of thing. So, well, I mean, they're obviously, I'm not going to say targeting those outlets specifically, but their algorithm, however that's designed, is preferring those, right? Through
Right.
if it's basically because of user activity, I have no idea. I can't really speak to that, but
Oh, it's
that's
because
what
of
you're getting.
advertiser friendliness. Nerd City did a video on their algorithm and how they've
Okay.
got flags for certain content and content creators that are like they exclude them from advertiser unfriendliness and exclude them from search bans on the basis of them being like corporate and verified and shit.
Mm,
And like using certain words, blah blah, all this stuff. Like if you're blocked from a certain like advertiser friendliness, your video is actually flagged to show up like lower down
hmm.
in search results. Also, like not show up in recommended, not get notifications. Like people barely know you exist at that point unless you have an
Mm.
established audience. Um, and so that's why all these corporate bullshit jerk offs get their fucking play because they don't do that and that's also the reason why you'll see a downvote ratio on a lot of these corporate videos. It's not even necessarily because people didn't like the coverage. It's because people don't like that YouTube is slowly becoming ThemTube.
Hmm. Okay.
Go ahead though.
Well, yeah, no, that's fine. So obviously they have a different methodology that I've noticed in testing it. That if you search, like I said, politics, news, these types of things, you're going to get like those news outlets. But if you search for something outside of that, and I can't speak to a lot of subjects, but like I was searching for something in relation to Atari or Vectrex or some of these older legacy, video game systems, of course, all I
Sega.
got was YouTube. What's that?
Sega. All about
Yep,
Sega.
Sega Genesis. There you go. uh, you get YouTube stuff, kind of thing. So I'm looking at the list right now on my other screen, and I'm not going to say most, a considerable amount, the highest amount of content that we have is actually from Youku, Youku.
Mm.
And then underneath that would be OK.ru, which is in Russia. And then there's obviously Instagram. There's Bilibili from Indonesia. These are in order of like most amount of videos, proportionally. And then there's Daily Motion under that, which you never really see much Daily Motion anymore. There's Twitter. There's Tudou, Tudou, which I don't remember what region that's from. I've been going through these for so many months, I have lost track of where they're from. But
that's the first one I'm not familiar with that you've brought up.
Yeah, and then there's QQ, which I believe is in China, I think.
Yeah.
Vimeo. Then there's VK. Then there's Nico Video in Japan. A lot of stuff from the Internet Archive, archive.org. Stuff from TikTok. There's stuff from Apparat, which can't remember where Apparat is. I think it's in the Middle East. Then there's mail.ru from Russia. Then there's IQIYI, which I think is also in China. Then there's Naver. There's no way people have heard a lot of these things. But my whole point in doing this is people shouldn't really care about where it's coming from. They should care about getting what it is that they want.
Right.
And discovering a new. Go ahead.
Well, that's one of the things is like the global community promised by the internet in the 90s and, fucking, oh, everybody's going to be connected in Kumbaya. And then everybody's like isolated echo chambers now because it's more advertiser friendly and corporate blah, blah.
Yeah, unfortunately, the collapse of a lot of these platforms and everything have they've gained a tremendous market share. They've gained customer loyalty, but they've kind of shrunk the diversity in the process, and now they're controlling everything.
Yeah.
It's the whole monopoly idea, and people are just not everybody, obviously. And, thankfully there's a significant user base that's really dissatisfied with the way that a lot of things are going. And that's one of the reasons, I decided to do this as well, obviously. So, yeah, I could go through this entire list, and there'd be tons of things that you probably haven't heard of and that your users probably haven't heard of, which is great. I mean, I'm looking at one here too as well, tune.pk, which is out of Pakistan.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, and the thing too is a lot of people don't realize that, they might be like, well, why would I care about Pakistan? Well, a lot of these platforms, I would say about 95% of them also carry English content.
Mm-hmm.
English, not only in their description and their title, but the video too as well. So it could be that maybe YouTube bans a video. Well, that video might have been distributed on all these other places in these other countries.
Right.
At the same time, or at a different time kind of thing. So it gives you that option to find it in a different place without knowing essentially where to go.
Yeah, well,
nobody's going to know all these 55 of these.
Perspective, being able to hear from the horse's mouth what's happening over there is fucking sweet.
Oh yes, no, yeah, right, yeah, regionally, of course, yeah, totally get you.
Because
I've gotten that from
don't
people
get
too.
it through
Yeah,
the filter. You hear it straight from the civilians of Pakistan, for instance. If something,
right,
if the U.S. decided to bomb Pakistan, you would hear about it on a site like that, and you might not hear it from CNN. CNN didn't even cover the bombing of Serbia until people started crying about it a week later. These corporate news outlets are not your friend in terms of informational freedom, and they will coerce you into a very narrow mindset. So it's kind of refreshing to see a neutral and sort of unadulterated search.
Right. Yeah, but that's the other thing too as well, is because we don't save and track user activity. It's never going to be geared toward things that you've searched before or what most people have searched for. It's basically based on keyword density, term frequency, things like that, which is really what it should be about.
Yeah, definitely. So the other question I have is, how big are you willing to get? Because you say that, you're one guy and that limits some of what you can do. Are you looking to ever hire anyone? Are you looking to become something broader and something that like is more of like a multi-person competitor to these big ass corporations? Because if so, how can people help with that? There's gonna be a groundswell of support if that's the case.
Well, I mean, what I've been doing so far is, employing some contractors, basically, so to speak, if I need some code written or I need a UI change to the website or um, some PR outreach, emails sent, that kind of thing. I'm the guy that's in charge of doing all the coding for the back end, which would be the search engine, writing the crawlers and making sure that search works properly and all the admin stuff and all that. But I am interested in making it bigger. It's difficult, but we started out a year ago, ground zero, essentially launched the website. It's been about a year now. I
Gotcha.
don't know if are you familiar with the Alexa rank?
Yes, yeah, and
Okay.
and Yandex and all that shit.
Yeah, well, they have their own ranking system. So essentially, the way that the Alexa rank works is they have a ranking from one, which I guess would probably be Google, two being YouTube, that kind of thing, that goes all the way to I guess about 20 million or so, and that's how you rank like your traffic or where your website is at, kind of thing, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I found out today there's I think 1.5 billion websites on the internet right now.
Yeah,
1.5 billion.
more and more if you count stuff that's not on the ClearNet.
Yeah, or subdomains or that kind of stuff too. Yeah. So essentially speaking, when we started, I think we started at about like our Alexa rank was about 16 million. And through like blogger outreach and getting, press stories and some hook-ins to like universities and things like that, we've been able to reach an Alexa rank of about 200,000 right now. So that's our rank is 200,000 out of 20 million, so to speak, or out of 1.5 billion. So we've been able to achieve that in 1 year, which I think is really good.
Yes, it is.
And yeah, so and I've been incredibly aggressive about like reaching out, to journalists and strategically trying to reach like librarians and people and people that libertarians and people that are essentially into the whole free speech movement and non-biased media and trying to get engaged on social networks that have those types of people that are hungry for resources like that, like what we're doing. So I've gone directly toward trying to reach those audiences. Hasn't been incredibly easy, but I think we've made a really good go at it this first year, and we have a really good domain authority at this point too, which means where we appear in Google search and that kind of thing for video search and different terms is going well. But I'm really not banking on that, so to speak, because I don't see at this point anybody going to a search engine and typing in video search like in Google. It just doesn't happen anymore. They've completely dominated, that area.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than trying to say, "Hey, we're better than YouTube," that is completely fucked up to even try to do something like that. It's just stupid. So what we've decided to do, hypothetical it's me, whatever. I've decided to go after the people that can most appreciate and most use the offering, which
Right. Well,
is
and
what you
sort of
should
like
be
if you
doing.
build
Yeah.
it, they will come kind of thing, right?
To an extent, but you have to go knocking on those doors and say, "Hey, I know that you're interested in, these types of things." And the thing is, I've found followings on both sides,
Mm-hmm.
both extremes kind of thing. I started out initially with people that were incredibly like liberal kind of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
they've embraced it very well. And then recently, in the past few months, we've switched over to like incredibly conservative, and they've like completely, maybe even loved it even more. The
Well, because they both
responsiveness has
love
been,
it for different reasons, especially
yeah,
since YouTube blocks like far left and LGBT content.
right.
But
No,
they
you
also
totally.
block like hate figures for blah blah, and basically anybody that's like, I don't know, right of Tim Pool is an extremist.
Mm,
So, you know, according to their algorithm. And sometimes Tim Pool is also that, and it doesn't help that he occasionally hangs out with extremists himself. Like Thought Slime's recent video is reasonably good on that particular conundrum, but I I won't try to get your take on that because I know you want to remain neutral. The point is
Right.
that you are trying to remain neutral, and that's a huge draw for some people.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that basically the mission statement kind of speaks for itself and can be applied and appeal to both sides essentially, because really when you think about it, both sides kind of want free speech. They may want it their own way, but you know what I'm saying. But it still applies, and it's still being
Yeah.
taken away from a lot of people. So
Yeah, well, and it's like that fucking beautiful immortal technique line saying, stop letting corporate news tell lies to your children. This is the new front. This is the new like war. This is the information war. The info war that Alex Jones talked about is here. And whether or not you agree with him, I certainly don't in many arenas because I'm a
sure.
dirty anarchist. But, the same, like, it's happening. There is an info war. Whether or not you like it, whether or not you agree with anyone on any given side, it's happening. And you can
Right.
either choose to pick up your gun or you can get shot. That's the plain truth.
Yeah, or I imagine plenty of people are just fine with just letting things be whatever they're going to be. That either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
Normies.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
The people who make YouTube a more popular resource than PeteyVid.
I Yeah, I was going to say in relation to that what I said earlier is, going up against them. I like to take the standpoint that like I have no problem in them deciding that they're going to do what they want to do. I'm just glad there's alternatives, like BitChute and these other places, Minds.
Mm-hmm.
There are other places for people to go, and there will continue to be more, which is just naturally how things work out. So I'm glad that that's happening. And I don't ever want to be considered something that's better than YouTube. I want to be considered something that is kind of a different option, just a value add, just
Well, and you're not allowing for uploading and commenting and shit. The only thing
absolutely.
you're doing,
Yeah.
you're not even going so far as Gab did in creating like a dissenter extension or whatever. You're not trying to break into the market of actual commentary or content hosting. You're trying
Right.
to access people who just want to be able to see, sort of like the informational minds stored in a fucking jail trying to breathe free. That's who you're trying to get at. You're not trying to get it
Right.
like being better than YouTube. You're trying to get better like than DuckDuckGo for video. And if DuckDuckGo
Sure.
improves as a result of you showing them how it's done, then that's just a beneficial side effect, right?
Who knows? Maybe they'll want to acquire me. I
Well,
don't
and
know.
okay, so would you be willing to do that? Be absorbed into something?
Not at this point, but at a certain point, possibly, yeah. Um, that's a really tough question. I mean, the
It
thing is,
is.
it depends. It depends on who it is, and it depends on what they're going to do with it. And
I
the
kind of
thing
hope you
is I
don't.
think what it is that we're doing is so specific and it's so niche and it's so like risky in a way. I don't see anyone like Bing being like, "Hey, come on in to the Bing video tab." No, that's not going to happen.
Right. Well, and
But
and, and I kind of hope it doesn't because I like the fact that competition breeds a better result. I think
right.
if you got absorbed into one of these conglomerates, they'd probably start making a whole lot of decisions that would remove your edge anyway.
Well, and not only that, to absorb or embrace or use what it is that we have, they would have to be willing to say, okay, we're willing to basically cut out a certain amount of our user base because you don't have all of YouTube.
Right.
So that's the end of the discussion right there. They wouldn't have, I don't want to say the balls, but you know what I'm saying. That's a really big decision to cut out your user base and give them the finger, basically saying, okay, we're going to give you this because we think this is great, but we're going to cut out all the YouTube stuff. They're so big at this point that nobody would dare do that.
Well, right, and
You know what I
you're
mean?
on my channel. You can say that they don't have balls. To me, they don't.
You see what I'm saying, though? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I'll say
I
it
think
for
we're
you.
positioned in a space that like I don't think many places would have you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you
Most
don't.
places would not be like, hey, I'm going to make a video search engine, but like YouTube's not going to be in it. No, nobody would fucking do that. Like,
Well, it's definitely not quote advertiser friendly because
right,
advertisers love Google. Like the whole thing, like James Corbett calls it GooTube because it's like soft and easy to access. There's nothing hard. There's no information that anybody who gives a shit would give a fuck about. And it's all designed to be easy, palatable, blah blah, and this COPPA thing's gonna
Right.
make it worse.
Yeah.
So
Well, and there could be other things that are coming that we don't even know about yet that are gonna, weed out or thin out certain portions of their user base too as well. Who knows? Yeah.
hella. So
Right.
okay, uh, I guess we'll talk like an interview for a job. Where do you see this platform in 10 years?
Oh wow. I mean, I'm thinking much shorter term than that. I'm thinking 5, honestly. I think the internet and these types of things are going to change so dramatically, like over the next 10 years. I don't know. I mean, uh, could be that a lot of these platforms may not exist, like in the next 5 years. I don't know. It could be that a whole bunch of video providers like BitChute and whatnot,
Go belly
explode,
up.
or the other direction, yeah, or completely explode, and then you've got, some considerable competitors to YouTube. I,
Right.
I don't think like anybody's really a competitor to them at this point, unless you count like maybe Daily Motion over in France, but
Or
they've lost
Vimeo.
right, or them because they have a very specific kind of offering, market
Right.
offering, and yeah, that kind of thing, and positioning, which I totally respect them too as well. Um, I was going to say, side story, Daily Motion did try to sue Google because they claimed, I'll have to send you the link later on, but there was an article I found that they claimed that they were rigging search results to keep Daily Motion out.
Fucking really?
Yeah, and they totally sued Google, and they lost, but
Good.
it actually did happen, which is kind of crazy
Well,
that they were
sorry,
accused of that, like
I
in
shouldn't
public.
say good. So you're saying Daily Motion lost their lawsuit even though they had all the evidence necessary?
The article didn't go into that much detail. Yeah,
Okay.
but the fact that it was made public and that it was actually in the press was surprising to me. You
Yeah.
know,
Okay.
that a provider actually came out and said this is bullshit, and like you're suppressing our search results and that kind of thing. So, but I'll send you the link. So it's been going on for a little while that these other providers have been really unhappy with you know what's been going on.
Well,
Different
have any
topic,
of them
but
reached
anyway.
out to you specifically?
No, and your original question, where do I see things in the next 5, 10? Yeah, you said 10. I'm going to say 5, but
Totally fine.
in the next 5 years, I would like to see um, PeteyVid grow. I don't think that there's any more resources out there for PeteyVid to get at this point because I've spent an exhaustive almost year doing research and developing the ingestion of all these different resources worldwide. I'll get them like as they come out, as new ones come out, and we're doing some experimental R&D at this point to I don't know if you know this, but I actually wrote a crawler that would go on the Internet Archive and find old legacy, real audio, real video, QuickTime files that don't exist on the internet anymore and make them searchable through PeteyVid so that you can download them and view them directly
Mm.
from the Internet Archive, kind of thing. You have to have a VLC player to do that, that kind of thing. So I guess what I'm saying is in the next 5 years, I'd like to form more official relationships with these video outlets,
Right.
obviously, and have some kind of, I don't know, mutually beneficial, you know, position with them. Maybe get a direct feed for ingestion of their content, kind of thing, depending on what their user agreements look like, or not. And then ideally, I would like to see this grow toward not necessarily the exact magnitude, but something like what DuckDuckGo has right now, which is kind of like a pseudo evangelical following
Mm-hmm.
for a different purpose, obviously. But I think there's room for that there. And if I was going to say, would you be okay with an acquisition? I would with them, but really not anybody else.
Mm. Well, and I again like you know fucking this is semi journalistic, but semi like personal, and I do hope you don't do that personally. Like I think that this kind of platform could be a very good way to be a check and balance on the rest of the internet because for like there are so many examples of people like searching something on DuckDuckGo versus Google, and like showing how the results look on those platforms versus one another,
Right.
and I think that's great, but I also think DuckDuckGo needs the same thing for its own
Mm,
results, where
yeah.
somebody can say, hey, maybe DuckDuckGo is manipulated too. Maybe we shouldn't like immediately trust results we see on there either.
I'm with you. Yeah, I've heard those types of things and read those things too as well. People's skepticism and taking these things at face value, and nobody really actually doing their due diligence to check to make sure that, for example, information isn't being sent over to their advertisers. Because I
Right.
know for a fact that like any advertiser that has like advertising inventory, they require validation to make sure that the ads aren't being shown to like bot farms. They
Right.
need IP addresses. They need agents. So, I'm on that level of skepticism too as well, being like, wait a minute, how are you showing me ads about what I just searched for? And I know that the ad network that you're using, like Bing, they mandatorily require that the user IP address be sent over. I
Right.
know that I know that because I talked to Bing and I was going to show Bing ads on PeteyVid, and they told me that there was no way around that.
Right.
Anyways, not to like let the cat out of the bag, pardon the pun, but yeah. So I have a level of skepticism about that too as well. Being like, is nobody like checking into this? I'm not, trying to bash DuckDuckGo at all. I'm just
Well, right.
kind of,
Well, in
where's the proof?
because
I mean,
I bash everyone. I'm sort of an asshole to many people, and I have no problem saying that I don't think that an organization with no public audit has any business telling people that they don't do X, Y, and Z. Because in the ultimate truth, we're talking about an organization that doesn't have to prove anything. The only thing
right.
they have to do is, say their piece, and they've got basically an ad. So, I'm with you there. I'm skeptical too. Um, and I hope to have your platform as a way to do checks and balances against not only DuckDuckGo, but many other platforms for, well, not platforms. I guess services would be a better way of putting it. Um,
Right.
in order to say, hey, maybe all these services are mildly manipulated. Why is PeteyVid, who claims to be, neutral by 100%, registering my video as this X result, but DuckDuckGo isn't? And why is DuckDuckGo registering this much higher than Google, or et cetera, et cetera? In order to
Mm.
have true checks and balances, there need to be more than two powers behind them. Otherwise, they could just be shaking hands in some fucking hotel after getting blowjobs from a cocaine hooker. Um, so, to me, like, I'm glad to see this additional layer of competition.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think it definitely needs to happen. Yeah.
okay. Is there anything else you want to say to people? And keep in mind, this is a relatively free fire channel.
There's one thing that I was going to add just to kind of, you know, basically spell out like the process of what I go through kind of thing and figuring out like new things to do or that kind of thing. I'm toying around with the idea right now, which I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to do this or not. But I've built a prototype that essentially has leveraged the Internet Archive to get all the YouTube video IDs that are saved by the Internet Archive because they've been saved since almost day one, even before they were acquired by Google. Anyways, I've cataloged all the video IDs from the beginning of time until now that have been saved on the Internet Archive, and I've basically checked those against what exists on YouTube right now. And so I know everything that's been taken off of YouTube that still exists and is playable on the Internet Archive. And one of the things I'm toying around with at this point is I'm thinking about taking those videos that have been taken off of YouTube and putting them into PeteyVid and referencing the Internet Archive source, which means you'll be able to go to PeteyVid, type in a certain tag, and you'll be able to search for all the videos that have been taken off of YouTube.
That would be very interesting. So, do you have
Right?
a
I
timeline
mean,
on that project?
what's that?
Do you have a timeline on that project, or are you just kicking it around in the mental office for now?
It works right now. I need to
Refine it.
yeah, refine it, and not only that, think about like what the implications would be if YouTube comes back to me and says, "What are you doing? You can't do this," kind of thing.
Of course, all you would have to do in that case, like as far as I know, is tell them that all you're doing is linking and they
To the
can
archive,
shove it.
yeah. Well, yeah, and they'd have to basically go to the Internet Archive, and tell them to take that stuff down.
Right.
Now, when I say it's been taken off of YouTube, it could be that somebody canceled their channel. It could be somebody decided to just delete the video because they just didn't want it there anymore. It could be that YouTube banned their entire account. There's a lot of different reasons that a video might not appear, in YouTube anymore. But yeah, I'm leaning heavily towards doing it just because if I'm on that mission, so to speak, to provide as much data as possible and diversity, why not include things that don't exist, on YouTube anymore for whatever reason? I don't need to know what it is, and give users the ability to have access to that.
Open the memory
Right?
hole.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, if I'm providing stuff from all these other countries, why not provide stuff that's kind of lost in time, so to speak?
Well, and if you started to do that, I'm sure that there are many other countries with many other video search providers that would also potentially have memory
Oh
hold
yeah,
content that could be resurfaced. So you've got a
you're right.
booming industry if that starts to take off. You'd be the grave digger for all these like ancient things.
Right. Yep.
All right. Well, is
Cool.
there anything else you wanted to say?
No, totally appreciate the opportunity to just, talk about stuff. And yeah, it's been great. Totally appreciate it.
Very cool. Let me see if there's any comments that have any questions. I posted this on three networks: Float, Twitter, and Facebook. It'll be on PocketNet after.
Okay.
And if there's any questions, I will let you know. How is PeteyVid pronounced? Well, I'm pretty sure we went over that. That's Ethan Boyle on Facebook.
No,
Um,
here's the thing. That's an excellent question because when I did my initial prototype, on the logo on the front page, PD and vid had no space between them.
mm,
And I did like a focus group test of about 100 people randomly from all over the world that spoke English. And a high percentage of them asked that same question. They didn't know what the site was or how it was pronounced. And so what I did was I made it a capital P and a capital V and put a space in the middle. And then after that, they got it. So when the two words are together, it's very often people don't necessarily know that they're two words or whatever kind of thing. So anyways, we fixed that in the initial redesign. But on Twitter, I'm looking at it now, and obviously you can't have a space in your mention. So
yeah,
makes sense.
well, you can put an underscore if you theoretically wanted to, but I kind of hope you don't because to me,
No.
if people can't pronounce PeteyVid, I think they kind of, I don't know, they should like reattend elementary school. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know. Ethan is a smart guy, and I'm not saying that to him specifically. I think he probably knew how it was pronounced and didn't like make any false assumptions there.
Sure.
I'm just mostly joking about the kinds of people who would literally have a problem with that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's the only question. Let me make one last check to the live chat, and if that's the case, why don't you wrap up by telling people where you can be found and where information is?
Sure. So the website's located at www.peteyvid.com. That's PETEYVID, short for PD Video. And the search engine box is right there on the front page. There's also a hashtag page where you can go and look at the most current video hashtags across social media, so you can search hashtags directly. And there's also a donate page too as well. We've had a bunch of people from different countries donating towards the cause, and then we send you merch. We have PeteyVid shirts and stickers, and then we have little like photo things that we send to you. We take a picture of Pete for you and send that to you.
Well,
So we're
okay.
totally in on that whole concept too. So there's a donation page if you're really interested in that kind of thing too. And we have a cryptocurrency donation thing on Minds too as well.
So I
Yeah.
guess that's a good question to leave off by, because I had your website up on the screen for the past like 30 seconds. When people click that donate thing, is there a subscription donation option?
There's not. No, it's a one time in exchange for merch.
Well,
Um,
this is me not. I'm taking off the journalism hat for a moment and just saying
right.
I hope you get a subscription based system. Like, I know Patreon probably wouldn't have you because whatever my hateful content.
Right.
But if you got on Subscribestar, you would have people helping you. I almost
Okay.
guarantee it.
Yeah, believe it or not, it was just today. I was thinking about Patreon, and I was like, you know what? I'm thinking about doing it, but normally that model is for something that, something new comes out. It's a new episode, it's a new movie that they're working on, or something like that. And so that's my hesitation about using that platform is, yeah, we come out with new features and things like that, but we don't really have anything exclusive that we could give to somebody. So that's why it's more so based on the merch
Well, then
kind of
how about
concept.
this for the non-journalism portion of this video?
Okay.
I'll tell you, I would follow a PeteyVid blog for updates, etc. And if you got a PeteyVid blog, you would be a content creator, and you could post updates about PeteyVid, post about new platforms you're including, etc.,
Yep.
etc. And you could post that to Subscribestar.
Okay. Yeah, we do actually have a blog.
Oh, well then you're already a content creator. Get on
Yeah.
Subscribestar.
Scriptstar.
I'll give you a
Checking
ref
it
link
out.
because that
Yeah,
that
yeah,
way
that'd
I'll
be
get
great.
money out of it. But whatever.
Yep,
Um,
totally good. Yep.
um,
Okay. Yeah, great idea. Thanks. Yeah.
because I want to see you succeed. I like this idea, and it's a powerful tool for potential journalists. And gotta say, tools are getting scarce. People are starting to dry up. The state is starting to crack down, and people are becoming bitches. So I'm glad to see somebody who isn't.
Thanks. Very cool. And thanks for your recommendations too. So,
Anyway, glad to have you. If any of you have any questions, he can be reached at PeteyVid on various social networks. Um, and generally speaking, information is coming through a narrower and narrower funnel. And the baker might not be putting in your bread what you think is in there. So just keep that in mind. Keep yourself angry, keep yourself informed, and smash the state.
awesome.